This is going to be in defense of the 2026 CrossFit Open and why I believe it was a great test and did the job it was supposed to do. But in order to go there, and again, I'll say this isn't no one specifically on YouTube, but I've learned a lot from Hiller on programming. I've learned a lot from Taylor Self. I would love to sit in the room and just watch J.R. Howell do his programming. That would be fascinating to me. But in general, I've heard some general criticisms that I think are just off the mark. And I wanted to go over specifically why I think the 2026 CrossFit Open was a great test for what it was supposed to do. So with any test, I think you guys get this, in order to know if it's a good test or not, we have to agree on what are we testing. If I'm trying to find the strongest person and I have everybody run a 5K, that's a bad test for finding the strongest person. If I'm trying to find the best runner, then a 5K is a perfect legitimate thing to include in that test. So before you even start critiquing anything, you have to say, what are we trying to arrive at? What are we trying to prove with this test? And with the Open, and again, guys, I haven't crunched all the numbers on this when I refer to this, but I have done 15 Opens. We had 50 some people at the gym do the Open. And if the average age for the CrossFit Open is 37, that's right around the average age at King William District CrossFit. And so I think there's a good comparison there. And so as I speak to this, that's kind of the reference I'm speaking from a lot of that experience and knowing how things go in a CrossFit box. But if you think about the CrossFit pyramid, bottom is nutrition, then it's metabolic conditioning, then gymnastics, weightlifting, and at the top is sport. That's very similar on the pyramid to how the CrossFit season would go and what it needs to be testing along the way. So the Open is the first level. It is 99% of the people out there are people that are doing these workouts in CrossFit boxes, regular people who are doing CrossFit to stay fit for life. They're not competing and trying to go anywhere in the sport. They may want to test themselves and see how fit they can get, but this is a hobby for them, how they stay fit. So we need to be testing metabolic conditioning. That's basically it. We are testing the bottom of the pyramid. Metabolic conditioning is the basis for your fitness, and this is the first level of that test. So that is what we need to be testing. Now, we're going to use gymnastics and weightlifting to help do that test. But the gymnastics and weightlifting should be fairly accessible skills, fairly base level skills, nothing too complicated. And the strength tested should be strength stamina. It should not be absolute strength yet. We should be using weightlifting and gymnastic strength to test strength stamina that helps our metabolic conditioning move along. And in essence, the stronger people are going to naturally move forward if that's the case, because if I can push jerk 200 pounds and you can push jerk 150 pounds, I'm going to be able to probably do more reps with 100 pounds than you are. There are going to be some outliers on that, but the majority of people are going to fall into that camp. If I'm stronger than you, then I can move this weight on this movement more times than the person that isn't as strong as me. And that's the appropriate kind of strength to be testing in the CrossFit Open. And specifically this year, especially. The only year we can compare 2026 to right now is 2024, because 25% of the people are going to move up to the next level if they want to continue through the CrossFit season. So 25% move up. So because of that, more than at any other time, we have the most room for error in the CrossFit Open. We have the most room for error as far as what we're testing, because the right people are most likely to move on. I can guarantee anybody that's a games athlete or even close to a games athlete is going to move to the next level. Without a doubt, 100% of them are going to make it there. The only people that might be affected by this are the people right around the 75% level. But if you're a marginal 75% level athlete and need to get a little lucky on the movements, that's an appropriate thing to have happen. You might make it one year, you might not make it the next. That's okay. And because of that, thinking backwards from how you'd have to program with CrossFit, I want you guys to think of this. When I get to the games, the top of the pyramid, the sport of fitness at the top, the test needs to be the most specific. It can really get specific with technicality, with weight, with everything we do. It needs to test the widest breadth and depth of skills across all things, and it can be very technical and very specific at times. And then you go below that to regionals or whatever is going to be there. That test could be less specific, but still more specific than the level below it. And so because of that, if I was programming for the games, or let's say I was programming for the Open and somebody else was programming for the games, I would just need to know from that person, what movements are you doing? Is there any movement you're doing a whole lot of? Like we're going to do 400 pull-ups in a workout or something like that. And what are you going to be moving heavy? What lifts are you going to move heavy weight on? Doesn't mean you can't do any of those things at the lower levels, but it would be something you would need to take into consideration, because there's no reason throughout the test to be doing pull-ups at every single level. I'm not saying you couldn't and not have enough. It wouldn't be a bad thing to have that happen, but there would be no need to pigeonhole yourself that way. So knowing what they're doing at this level, at the other levels down here where I don't have to be as specific, I could potentially use other movements. Because with this kind of an open format, this level does not have to get anybody to the games. No one is going to the games from the Open. All that they need to do is get to the next level. And this test for sure got everybody that needed to get to the next level. And if there's any flaws in the testing, I think we know there's a small percentage of people out there that are probably doing some fishy stuff with their scores. So it's never going to be perfect, but it's getting most of the right people there. The only ones that are going to be missing are right around that 75% cut line. So how do we test metabolic conditioning? Well, I've gone over this in other videos that I've talked about too, but there's certain movement patterns I think that should be tested. Basic movement patterns in the body. You should be squatting during the Open. You should have pulling off the ground. You should be doing some type of a gymnastics movement. You should be hinging at the hip, pulling at the ground, kind of the same thing. I would like to see unilateral work. So again, unilateral work means one arm is working independently of another, or one leg is working independently of another. Because I think, again, if you think of the CrossFit's 10 general physical skills, balance, coordination, agility, accuracy are definitely a part of that. And by doing unilateral work, you're testing balance, coordination, all that kind of stuff, but at a very base level. It's not too technical. And that's exactly where it should be for the CrossFit Open. And we did all those things. If you think about what we did squatting movements. We did unilateral upper and lower body movements. When we did step-ups onto the box, that is a unilateral movement. And then when we were doing the snatches overhead, that was a unilateral movement for the upper body. So we tested those. We did the hip hinging with the snatching off the ground, with the cleaning off the ground, pulling off the ground. We did the gymnastics pulling with the pull-ups and the muscle-ups and that kind of stuff in that workout. Thrusters and burpees are kind of I feel like a requirement in the Open, just for how much of the body they test, as well as the metabolic conditioning factor that those two elicit. And we even did jumping. And again, I think that's a movement that does need to be tested. And I think in replacement of the double unders this year, since there wasn't any double unders, was all those box jump overs. Again, a different kind of jumping test, but very much testing the same kind of thing. Not as technical as double unders, but more I would say more full body movement. I guess you could debate that. At least more range of motion at different joints. But either way, a jumping kind of a movement. So I think they covered that too. Also, in general, I think at the Open level, you're testing basically the core CrossFit time frame, which is between 8 and 20 minutes in that time frame there. All three of these workouts fell into that time frame. If you look back at 2024, when we also graduated 25% of the people to quarterfinals, they all kind of fit in that time frame too. They all did that year too. So I think he's letting this be kind of that core CrossFit metabolic conditioning kind of test, and then moving on. What did we miss? Well, a lot of people are saying we didn't get heavy enough on this workout. Again, the kind of strength we should be testing right now is strength stamina. And I can tell you, watching everybody at the gym, watching the scores out there, that 115 thruster and 135 thruster got heavy for people. I've never seen so many games athletes that needed 5 or 6 more thrusters on a bar and were resting before they did them. Yes, a metabolic conditioning, but also a local muscle fatigue combined with that. And that's exactly the kind of metabolic conditioning with strength stamina I talked about at the beginning that we should be testing. If that you needed to get a good score on those workouts for everybody up into the 50s at least, those cleans needed to be pretty easy for you. If those cleans were heavy, you were not going to get very far, because for most people, the thrusters were the harder movements. And if you were struggling on those cleans, that was a limiting factor, saying you weren't quite as strong as the other people that could just throw that weight around. We also didn't press overhead a lot. We didn't do the wall walks. We didn't do, handstand push-ups, and we didn't do a lot of push jerks. Now, we did get the arm overhead. For those of you with all the wall balls we did in the first workout, I know shoulder strength was a very limiting factor for a lot of people. I saw do 26.1. And then with the snatches, or with the overhead lunges into the dumbbell snatches, a lot of you guys know we're holding that finished position of a dumbbell snatch throughout the lunges, and then you're going right into the snatches. So it definitely tested overhead strength stamina. And it also, holding anything overhead like that is going to rocket up your heart rate, which is exactly what it did. So again, testing metabolic conditioning, but we didn't press overhead as much. But that's fine, because again, going back to what I was saying, you can compromise the most at this level. We tested overhead strength. We didn't test specifically pressing. That can be done with the top 25% at quarterfinals. Because when you're getting the top 25%, you're getting most of the RX type athletes at your gym. Maybe not all of them, because again, some are right on the cusp for whatever reason. But you're getting a lot of those athletes to this level if they want to. And so you're going to get the chance to test that overhead pressing. The top athletes are the top athletes. They're the top athletes in the open, and then in regionals or semifinals or quarterfinals, all the way up. And as the test gets more refined, it helps delineate that group out when it's done properly. And at this level, what needs to be done right? One of the biggest thing, guys, is format. And this is why I'm only really want to take credence and criticism from people who are working out in a CrossFit box or they own and run a CrossFit box. Because those people get, and the people making the test get, that's who 99% of the people are that are doing the open. And it needs to work for those people the most, more than it does for the games athletes right now. At the games, it has to work only for the games athletes. That's the focus. Right now, the games athletes are not the focus. They're going to be fine. It's everybody else that should be the focus with this open. So the test needs to test the right thing. It needs to test metabolic conditioning in combination with strength stamina using gymnastics and weightlifting. And I would say, you go over for you guys at King William District CrossFit, what was today's workout? It was formatted like Fight Gone Bad, but there were two machines, bike and rowing, and then you were doing box step-ups with a dumbbell, possibly, and then hang dumbbell power snatches. What today's workout was testing was exactly what the open should be testing. Overall engine, some local muscular stamina. It was testing it on the lower body and the upper body unilaterally, which was just a bonus. It wouldn't have to, but it does do that. So you get that strength stamina on each side. Why it would be a bad test is because of the format. Because for most gyms, they might not have echo bikes. They might not have the space to have the 4 different stations we had and run a class. So if I propose this workout to Dave, I would expect him to say, yeah, it tests the right thing, but it doesn't test it in the right way that we can run across a large group of people. Because the movements that we use in the open need to be very easy to judge, very easy to facilitate for a large group, and able to be fit in within an hour. Those are the most important things, and all these workouts did those things, as well as testing our engine. I think there was one issue, a little bit, that could have been better. I've said before, and a lot of people have said, testing a 1 rep max or a heavy complex is not appropriate in the open, because it can have too much an effect of your overall standing if you just get really high on that one thing. Because again, we're not testing absolute strength yet. We're testing metabolic conditioning. And so you're testing the wrong thing with that lift. Someone could have a much faster tie break time on the second workout, but if they didn't get one muscle up, they were way down the list from the person who finished way after them with a tie break time and still got a muscle. I don't think it made the test bad, but I think it put undue importance on that first muscle up. And I wonder if Dave would change that down the road, realizing that, again, I think you were testing something that needed to be tested at a slightly higher level rather than just testing your metabolic conditioning. But that's okay. I mean, this is luck of the draw, and the test is never going to be perfect, but it just needs to be complete. And this was a complete test for what it was meant to be testing. It got the job done. Guys, let me know what you think of that. I've run long enough. Right on.